Hi everyone, Chris here, and today I wanted to sort of wrap up our description of the hype cycle. So, we've been talking about the hype cycle the last few days and about how the hype cycle overlays sort of the human emotion level of novelty and excitement and hype, essentially, on top of the typical progression of technology maturity and technology adoption. So, at the tail end of the hype cycle, after the innovation trigger, the peak of inflated expectations, the trough of disillusionment, and the slope of enlightenment, we get the plateau of productivity. And this literally is drawn as a plateau here at the end of the cycle. And this is where most technologies in our lives are, actually. We don't think about a lot of technologies. So, this is when technology stops feeling like technology. It just is. Nobody thinks of the ballpoint pen as a really innovative technology, but when it was released, it went through the same kind of craziness, and now it's just everywhere and ubiquitous and becomes kind of invisible. So this is when technology and innovation starts to become invisible. It's just there. We take it for granted. This is the stage when we start to take things for granted. And it's a great place to be. It means that the technology is stable and predictable and usable. So, once you get to this place, it's all about maintenance and watching for the next thing. Because one of the stages that we don't really talk about when we're talking about the hype cycle is what comes after this. And eventually you get the cliff of obsolescence, and then it's just, you're going to secondhand marts and looking on eBay for spare parts because that thing, you got to keep it going because you never are moved over to the new thing. But this plateau of productivity can last for decades. I mentioned the ballpoint pen. We're probably still going to be using those in another 100 years. So this can vary in length. And, sometimes technologies die at different stages. Common points of death are they never come out of the trough of disillusionment because there was nothing substantive to the technology to begin with. And then, the plateau of productivity can be short if the next new thing comes up and is better. Thinking about 8-track and cassette and CD, like 8-track was fine, would have worked for a long time, but the cassette was better, so people moved over. So you end up with a varying length of a plateau. So yeah, that's the hype cycle and the different ways that you can use it um, over time. So essentially watching the initial pieces of information as they come, keeping track of what's new, going to conferences, reading about things, having up Google alerts for things that you find interesting, watching the difference between the actual level of maturity of a technology, what it can actually do, and all the hype. Reining people in at the peak of inflated expectations is great. And this is also a time when people get really excited and they're investing money in custom installations. So if you truly want to have some crazy custom fun, this is the time to do that when you can sort of go in at the ground floor and work with people to make custom installs. The trough of disillusionment, this is when you remind everyone not to throw the baby out with the bathwater and you start to watch what the technology can realistically do. As you rise up the slope of enlightenment, watch for those best practices and starting to watch those off the shelf solutions being able to be bought. And then the plateau of productivity, the boring stage, where it just is. People take it for granted. And if it's a really enduring piece of technology, an enduring innovation, eventually people stop considering it technology to begin with. And yeah, so different things you can do to watch, different cautionary tales at each level. Don't get caught up in the hype. And then another piece is when you're watching an innovation or a technology move through this cycle, consider the amount of risk that you can take as an individual or as an organization. Uh, the time to payback for something early in the stage is very, very long. So the people who and the organizations who can invest in early technologies have resources and have time. So there's nothing wrong with waiting, which is great. Anyway, that that's the hype cycle. Thanks, Jackie Fenn, for describing this and writing that book. And I will talk to you guys tomorrow.